For me, Taiwan, in my mind, it was this kind of like huge factory. When I first arrived in Taiwan, I hated it. I absolutely hated it. And I wanted to go back to England. I was living with my mum, had no car. When I first arrived, I was in this tiny little like shared room in Taipei. It was raining, cold and wet, and I was really hungry, and I was walking around the street. Many Taiwanese people would stop and just stare at you. And that was my first meal in Taiwan, and I just thought, oh, this sucks.
Hi, 大家好，欢迎来 Welcome to Taiwan。今天我们跑去到台北跟我们英国朋友聊天。影片开始以前，请不要忘记订阅、按赞、开启小铃铛，谢谢大家。
My name's David Coles. I come from England, a place called Gosport in between Southampton and Portsmouth. And in Taiwan, I work in Montessori, in education.
Let's go back memory lane. Why do you choose to come to Taiwan?
24 years ago, I traveled around the world. And a large part of that was in Asia. I found myself in a taxi in Malaysia, a little town called Kota Bharu. And I was traveling to a port to get a ferry to an island. And I shared that taxi with a South African guy. Never met him before, we just were going in the same direction. He told me he was a teacher trainer here in Taiwan. And by the end of the taxi ride, he'd offered me a job to come over to Taiwan and teach English. But then 6 months later, I returned back to the UK. I'd spent all my money traveling. I was living with my mum, had no car. And the thought of going back to my management career, it wasn't very appealing after experiencing, independence traveling around the world. So I found that card, looked it up online, applied for a job. And then a few weeks later, I was here in Taiwan. That was, 23 years ago now. I knew very little. For me, Taiwan was, in my mind, it was this kind of like huge factory. Because in England, everything at that time, you just turned it upside down and looked at the bottom and said, made in Taiwan. I knew it was an island. I had no idea about the people here. I had very little idea about the language. I knew they spoke Mandarin and they had their own sort of dialect Taiwanese. Even though I traveled around Asia a lot, I never actually met anyone that had been to Taiwan, apart from that teacher trainer in the taxi.
Not knowing much about Taiwan, and you just came in. Could you take us through your first wow experience to the point where you found your feet?
When I first arrived in Taiwan, I hated it. I absolutely hated it, and I wanted to go back to England. It wasn't so much about my experience in Taiwan, it was about having left the UK for over a year traveling, then returning to my family and my friends, but then literally weeks later, leaving again for at least another year. I was very, very homesick. When I first arrived, I was in this tiny little like shared room in Taipei. It was raining, it reminded me of England. And it was cold and wet, and I was really hungry, and I was walking around the street, and everything was in Chinese. There wasn't much English on the menus. So all I could do was like point and nod. And I just remember I came across a stall where they were selling like where you have a little basket and you select all your like little things like mushrooms where they sell jipai, that kind of place. And I remember just like looking, I was like, what is that? And I just didn't recognize a lot of the stuff. So I remember pointing to the French fries and maybe the mushrooms and I don't know, maybe a bit of corn. And that was my first meal in Taiwan. And I just thought, oh, this sucks. And I really wanted to go home. But then I just told myself, okay, give it another week. Give it one more week. Give it 1 month. And if it's really that bad, I can just head back home. And I did. And almost instantly, the next day, started to meet people, walking around the streets. People started to talk to me and they were very friendly. And I actually moved to Geelong. My first place where I worked was in Geelong. And in Geelong, there are very few foreigners at that time. So as you walk around, many Taiwanese people would stop and just stare at you. And I found that very sort of uncomfortable in the beginning, but quickly kind of got used to it. and then eventually found other foreigners in that area and started to make contacts and make friends, and then through them make more friends. And then suddenly when you have that connection, that human connection, everything changed.
Yeah, that's right. Similar happens to me. When I came, I think for the first 3 months, I think literally I cried, in my bed, cried that I don't know why am I here.
Right.
Because I couldn't eat anything. All that I could eat was McDonald's.
Yes.
So every day that's where I go to get my food. But after when I started interacting with the other international students, we had a soccer team.
Okay.
So I started playing soccer with them.
Oh.
And I started settling down and feeling calm and started feeling like home or sort of. But before that, literally I would cry at night that I want to go home. There are two main differences between the way of life between Taiwanese and the British.
In the UK, things are much more slower. The pace of life is slower. Children, for example, have much more free time. They go to school, they start school later, they have more recess times, they finish school earlier, and then after school they tend to go home, rather than in Taiwan, where they're in school much longer each day. After school, they then go to these like cram schools or bushiban for extra English or extra Chinese or extra math. So children get very little time to really work out who they are, what they want to do, because they're constantly busy. They never really get time to be bored. Also, I think one thing I've noticed in Taiwan, when children are struggling at school in a certain area, say for example math, the parents will then spend a lot of money and time for those children to take extra classes in math to raise their math ability. So in England, when children show strength in something, that's where all the resources go. Instead of trying to raise all these weaknesses, why not go for identify what the strength is and then just let them go with that strength. Focus on the strength rather than the weaknesses. So I think that's one difference. The other one, family. In Taiwan, and this is one thing I really, really do admire about Taiwanese culture, is the extended family. Different generations live together in Taiwan. So you could have the kids, the parents, the grandparents, potentially even the great-grandparents all in the same house, and taking care of the elderly, meeting their needs, is mostly done by the family. Whereas in the UK, this burden is pushed to the state. In the UK, we pay a lot of money in tax and insurance, ultimately so that when we are old, the government can then take care of our needs, our health needs, our social needs. Whereas I prefer the way it is in Taiwan, where the family takes on that responsibility.
So what part of Taiwanese culture you find most interesting?
Something that's always been interesting to me is the culture here of queuing. Just on any given day, walk around the city or wherever, and you see a long queue outside a restaurant or a store or something. As a Montessori teacher, I'm very used to observing. So things like this will get my attention. And standing there, watching, observing, you do see more and more people join that queue. But you don't, after a little bit more careful observation, you realize some of these people actually don't know what they're queuing for. But the queue itself seems to create demand for the product or service that's on offer. So it's almost like the longer the queue, the more value the product has. And that's always been fascinating to me, because there could be another restaurant right next door selling almost identical food, for example, and no one's there. No one's eating it. Yet you could go straight in and order and get served straight away and have your lunch and then leave. Whereas if you join the queue, you could be there for an hour, 2 hours, even 3 hours. That's always been very fascinating to me.
What advice would you give to anyone who wishes to come to Taiwan?
Traffic. Taiwan, as friendly as Taiwanese can be, and as generous and as kind as they can be, from my experience, once they're behind the steering wheel with the blackened out windows, you see a different side. They can be very aggressive on the road. Having said that, since living here and driving here, being aggressive on the road is actually, in many ways, a safer approach. Because if you are, letting everyone out all the time, you've got everyone behind you, beeping, potentially crashing into the back of you. So you do need to have some degree of aggressiveness, but I think that's something you kind of need to be prepared for. I come from England. In England, people follow the rules on the road. People give way on the road. However, in Taiwan, it's a little bit chaotic. But I guess there is some organization to the chaos. But yeah, that's definitely something to be aware of. I used to work in recruitment. At the end of the interviews, teachers, maybe they're preparing to come to Taiwan to teach for a year. I would always say to them, Taiwan's one of the few countries in the world where you need to look both ways when you cross a one-way street. So yeah, traffic is definitely a big one.
Yeah, that's right. So if you had to change anything in Taiwan, what would it be?
Education, for sure. Education. So I worked in recruitment before. I've also worked in career coaching, and in that line of work, I tried to help and advise mostly university graduates on getting work with international companies. I did this for quite a few years, and a lot of these candidates, they look fantastic on paper. They really do. Like, the academic achievements are phenomenal. But when it comes down to the soft skills, like the interpersonal skills and just the lack of eye contact, for example, it's quite worrying. And I think this is not going in the right direction. I think this is getting worse. So from my experience, I feel that this is largely the result of the education system in Taiwan. That's almost sole focus on academics instead of the whole development of children. Problem solving, critical thinking, negotiation, all these kind of things do not come from academics. They come from play. They come through socialization. They come through exploration and experience. And I just worry that the lack of that in Taiwan for children, Taiwan's competitiveness in the world, in my opinion, is going to struggle. It's a tough one. So if I could change anything, it would be to revamp the whole education system here, and let children have a childhood.
Montessori, is it common in Taiwan?
It's becoming more and more popular. I think in Taiwan, parents are trying to seek alternatives to the current education system in Taiwan, and Montessori is one of these alternatives.
So would you give us a quick description? What's the biggest difference between Montessori and this ordinary or normal, well-known education system?
One way the difference was explained to me when I first started learning about Montessori is that Montessori is a common sense approach to education. Ultimately, what Montessorians do is to follow and to meet the needs of the children. And it's really that simple, is to meet the needs of the children. And children have all the potential, everything is there. It's just a case of sort of creating the right environment, guiding them, and allowing that potential just to come out and to flourish. And for me, the highlight of this line of work is seeing children come into the classroom every day with that spark in their eye, like just ready to find out new things, to experiment, to experience things themselves, not have someone tell them something for them to remember.
Okay. All right. All his links will be in the description below. Let's go check it out. Okay. And do you have anything else to tell Taiwanese people?
My advice to Taiwanese people is advice I should follow myself, which is to slow down, take a step back. Just, especially with parenting, We all want the best for our children, and everything we do comes from a good place. Even like screaming and scolding a child, it comes from a good place because we want children to stop doing something bad. But sometimes we actually do a bit too much. We micromanage too much, whereas what could actually be not just an alternative, but a much better alternative is to just stand back and observe children. Let them be bored. Let them be innovative and creative. Like children, especially like 6 to 12 years old, it's almost like a superpower. It's their imagination.
Imagination, yeah.
But they don't get to use it. You know, it's such a shame. Don't organize so much. When they're bored, don't find something for them to do. Let them come up with it themselves and just watch, observe what they do, and you'll be amazed. Of course, we can be there, we can guide, we can help, but try not to be so hands-on. Just step back and enjoy.
Thank you very much for giving us your time and sharing your life experience living in Taiwan, and hope you continue to enjoy your stay here in Taiwan.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gansia ni sokan yo sihuan bu sihuan. Please don't forget to let us know what part of the video we can improve, and see you in my next video. 大家好. Your computer deserves the best protection. Don't wait until it's too late. Protect your files, your privacy, and your future with Surfshark One. Click the link below in the description to get yours and stay one step ahead of hackers.